All right, you space cadets, strap yourselves in. You guys wanted the lowdown on the International Space Station.
The ISS.
Yeah, that big-ass expensive as shit thing we got circling our asses up there.
Right.
You've sent us a crap ton of Wikipedia entries and articles.
Yeah, lots of stuff out there.
So we've got our work cut out for us, but luckily we've got
You got me.
you here who actually knows what the fuck they're talking about. You're going to help us sift through this cosmic bullshit.
Happy to be here. Let's get this party started.
Damn right. First off, let's address the elephant in the room. This thing costs a metric fuck ton of cash, like more than any other single object ever built.
It's true.
So right off the bat, was it worth it? What the hell do we get out of this thing?
Well, it's complicated. The ISS is a testament to international cooperation, which is pretty damn impressive.
Yeah.
Especially considering it came out of the Cold War.
Seriously, the commies and the Yanks building a goddamn treehouse together in space. Who would have thought?
Yeah, exactly. Back then, it was all about one-upmanship.
Right.
The U.S. had Skylab, the Soviets had Salute and Mir. Everyone was trying to prove they had the biggest dick in space.
I could dig it.
But then I guess cooler heads prevailed. They realized they could save a shitload of cash by working together.
Smart move, right?
Yeah. Pooling resources and sharing costs just made sense. So the U.S., Russia, Europe, Japan, and Canada all got together and built this incredible thing.
Except for the Chinese.
Yeah.
Right. They're still on the fuck you list when it comes to space stuff.
Unfortunately, yeah. Current U.S. law actually stops NASA from officially working with China on space projects, which is a real shame.
Yeah.
The space program is booming. We could all benefit from collaboration.
Total bullshit.
Yeah.
But hey, maybe someday. So tell me, how the hell did they actually build this thing? They didn't just launch it all up there at once, right?
Hell no. Building the ISS was a logistical fucking nightmare. Imagine building a Lego set in zero gravity with pieces coming from all over the world. Dead serious. They assembled it piece by piece, module by module over decades. Boeing built some modules. The Russians built others. Various European agencies chipped in. Was a truly global effort.
I bet there were some oh shit moments during construction.
You bet your ass. One of the biggest was the Columbia disaster in 2003 when that space shuttle blew up on reentry.
Right.
The U.S. grounded the whole fleet construction on the ISS, halted for years.
Damn, that's fucked up. So they're up there building this giant space house. What the hell are they doing up there all day?
Yeah.
Taking space selfies.
No, there are actually some seriously badass things going on up there. The ISS is a science lab. First and foremost, they're doing research we could only dream of doing down here.
Like what? Give me the juicy stuff.
All right, let's talk about how long-term space exposure messes with the human body. They're looking at muscle loss, bone density, even weird blood flow issues. This could be a huge problem for future Mars missions.
So going to Mars might turn us into weak-ass jellyfish. That's not exactly a selling point.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern. They're also looking at fluids and microgravity. This has led to some cool breakthroughs in our understanding of superconductivity.
Super what now? Sounds kind of boring.
Hold your horses. Superconductivity has the potential to change everything.
Okay.
Energy transmission, transportation, the whole shebang. Imagine a world without energy loss during transmission. We're talking ridiculously efficient power grids and maglev trains that go insanely fast.
Okay. I'm listening. What else have they got going on up there?
They're doing a ton of experiments on plants and animals, figuring out how living things grow and evolve differently in space. They're even looking into growing human-like tissues in space.
Hold the phone. Growing human tissue in space. What the fuck is that all about?
It's cutting-edge stuff, man. Imagine growing new organs for transplants right there in space. That's the goal.
Right.
They're studying how cells and tissues develop in microgravity. It could revolutionize regenerative medicine.
That's some seriously sci-fi shit, but let's be real for a second. Living on the ISS can't be all sunshine and spacewalks. So what about the downsides?
Well, it's not exactly a luxury space cruise for starters. It's cramped as hell up there. Imagine sharing a studio apartment with 5 other people for 6 months straight.
Yeah.
There's constant fan noise, zero privacy. It's basically a flying tin can.
I bet that shit gets old fast, especially if your roommate snores like a goddamn chainsaw.
And then there's the sleep deprivation. The ISS orbits Earth every 90 minutes, meaning the crew sees 16 sunrises and sunsets every damn day. Add to that the constant buzz of mission activity, and you've got a recipe for chronic sleep deprivation.
It sounds like a recipe for space madness. What about the psychological stress of being cooped up with the same people thousands of miles from home?
That's a huge factor. Astronauts experience serious stress from living in a high-pressure environment, dealing with people from different cultures and languages, and being far from family and friends. There have been cases of depression and anxiety on the ISS. Remember astronaut Michael Fink?
Yeah.
He missed the birth of his child while he was up there.
Fuck, that's got to be tough. And that's not even mentioning the constant threat of, well, dying in space, space debris, radiation, ammonia leaks. It's a goddamn minefield up there.
You're not kidding. Space debris is a constant threat. Think about it. We've been launching shit into space for decades, and all that junk is still up there zipping around at crazy speeds.
Yeah.
The ISS has dodged debris countless times. Sometimes the crew even has to evacuate to their escape pods. Remember that Russian anti-satellite weapon test in 2021?
Ugh.
That created a shitstorm of debris, putting the ISS and its crew at serious risk.
Those Russians are a bunch of reckless assholes. What about the radiation? Isn't that a major concern?
It's a big one. Astronauts on the ISS get hit with way higher radiation levels than us down here that increases their risk of cancer and other nasty health problems. They have to take shelter during solar flares, and their exposure is constantly monitored. It's a serious occupational hazard.
And then there are those terrifying ammonia leaks you mentioned.
Yeah, the cooling system uses ammonia, which is highly toxic. If there's a leak, the crew has to scramble to contain it before they get exposed. It's a high-stakes, high-stress situation.
So living on the ISS is not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. But this thing can't last forever.
You're right. It's nearing the end of its life, which is currently set for 2030.
So what happens then? They just let it burn up in the atmosphere.
The plan is for a controlled deorbit and crash landing in a remote part of the Pacific Ocean Point Nemo. It's the furthest point from any landmass, making it the safest place to ditch a giant space station.
So they're going to sink it like a goddamn battleship.
Pretty much there's been talk of extending its lifespan or repurposing parts of it, but nothing concrete. Yet private companies are already building their own space stations, so the future of space exploration might be more commercialized.
Private space stations. Sounds like something out of a William Gibson novel.
Yeah.
So the big question was, the ISS worth all the money and effort?
That's a tough one. It depends on your perspective. On the one hand, we've learned a shit ton from the ISS about living and working in space, about the effects of microgravity, and about the challenges and dangers of space exploration.
Yeah.
It's been a remarkable feat of engineering and international cooperation, but on the other hand, it was insanely expensive. Whether or not it was worth the cost is a question for each person to grapple with.
Fair enough. But here's what's bugging me. We've learned a lot about living in space, but what about actually using that knowledge? We haven't exactly been building moon bases or colonizing Mars, have we?
That's the next step, right?
Yeah.
The ISS has shown us what's possible, but it's just a stepping stone. Whether we take that next step is up to us. What do you think? Should we be pouring resources into building a moon base or shooting for Mars?
That's a great question for our listeners to chew on. Hit us up on social media and let us know your thoughts. And don't forget to stick around for part 2, where we'll delve into the more fucked up aspects of life on the ISS.
You know, for all the talk about the science and the future of space exploration, life on the ISS is not exactly glamorous.
Yeah, we touched on how cramped it is before. But seriously, how do these astronauts handle being stuck in that tin can for months on end? Doesn't it get to be a total mindfuck?
It definitely takes a certain type of person.
Right.
They're not just brilliant scientists and engineers. They've got to be incredibly adaptable and resilient.
Yeah.
Living in those close quarters, dealing with the constant noise and lack of privacy that shit can wear on you.
I bet you'd get sick of looking at the same faces day in and day out, even if they are your space buddies.
I'm sure it's not always easy, but remember, these are highly trained professionals. They're chosen not just for their technical skills, but for their mental toughness, too. They have to handle stress, isolation, and close quarters without completely losing their shit.
So basically, they're like space monks, all about discipline and inner peace.
They have to be incredibly disciplined and self-sufficient, and they need ways to blow off steam and de-stress. Some exercise, read, watch movies, or just stare out the window at the Earth.
Speaking of the view, what's it like looking out the window from up there? I bet it's pretty damn mind-blowing.
It's absolutely breathtaking. Astronauts say seeing Earth from space changes them, gives them a whole new perspective on our planet and its place in the universe.
I bet it makes all the bullshit down here seem pretty insignificant.
Totally. It's a humbling experience, makes you realize how fragile and interconnected our planet is and how important it is to protect it.
So it's like a spiritual awakening, but in space.
You could say that it's a profound experience that sticks with you long after you return to Earth.
All right, enough with the existential stuff. Let's talk about some of the crazy shit they've done on the ISS. I heard they even had a space tourist up there at one point.
Actually, several. The first was Dennis Tito, an American businessman who paid a cool $20 million for a trip to the ISS back in 2001.
$20 million for a week in space. Talk about an expensive vacation.
Well, it was a historic moment. It kicked off the era of private space travel.
So basically, anyone with enough cash can just buy a ticket to space these days. That's pretty wild.
It is. Of course, it's not that simple. You still need to go through rigorous training and medical checks. It's not like hopping on a flight to Vegas.
Speaking of wild, what about those crazy science experiments you mentioned earlier? What's the most batshit thing they've done up there?
They've done some pretty wacky stuff, that's for sure. For example, they've studied how spiders spin webs in microgravity,
Space spiders.
how flames behave differently in space, and how crystals grow in a weightless environment.
That's some creepy crawly shit right there.
Yeah.
What about the flames? Did they look all trippy and weird?
They do. They form these spherical shapes instead of the usual teardrop shape we see down here.
Oh, wow.
It's because there's no convection in microgravity, so the hot gases don't rise the same way.
That's pretty cool. So what's the point of all these weird science experiments? What do they actually tell us?
Well, it shows us that space is a unique environment, perfect for studying phenomena we can't observe on Earth. It's helping us develop new technologies and materials that could have all sorts of applications back here on terra firma.
Like what? Give me an example.
We'll take the research on fluids and microgravity. It's led to the development of new types of medical implants and drug delivery systems. They're also using microgravity to study how cancer cells grow and spread, which could lead to new cancer treatments.
So space research is basically helping us live longer and healthier lives. Who would have thought?
Exactly. And that's just scratching the surface. The potential applications of space research are practically endless.
All right, let's get back to the ISS itself. I hear there have been some seriously hairy moments up there.
Oh, yeah. Definitely a few close calls over the years. Remember those ammonia leaks I talked about?
Yeah, and the space debris.
Those were pretty scary.
Didn't they have to evacuate the station a few times?
They did several times. The crew had to take shelter in their Soyuz escape capsules while a piece of space junk whizzed past the station. Talk about a near-death experience.
Jesus, that's intense. So what's the protocol for something like that? Do they just shit their pants and hope for the best?
Thankfully, no. They have a sophisticated debris tracking system that monitors the orbits of all the known objects out there. If they detect a potential collision, they can maneuver the station out of the way.
So they're playing a giant game of space dodgeball up there.
But it's serious business. A collision with even a small piece of debris could be catastrophic.
And let's not forget about the radiation. Those solar flares can be pretty damn nasty.
No kidding. The station has shielded areas where the crew can take cover during a solar storm. But even with those precautions, they're still exposed to much higher levels of radiation than we are on Earth.
Damn, being an astronaut is not exactly a walk in the park.
You got that right. It takes a special breed to handle the physical and psychological challenges of spaceflight, but for those who are up to it, it's an incredible adventure.
All right, before we wrap this up, let's talk about the future. What happens to the ISS after it's deorbited?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the current plan is to crash it into the Pacific Ocean.
Right.
But there are some interesting proposals floating around for repurposing parts of the station.
Like what? Turning it into a space hotel.
That's one idea.
Hmm.
There are also proposals to use modules from the ISS to create new space stations in orbit around the moon or even Mars.
That would be pretty damn awesome.
It would also be a way to continue the legacy of the ISS and build upon the knowledge and experience we've gained from it.
Okay, one last thing that's been bugging me. Why haven't we gone back to the moon? We put a man on the moon over 50 years ago, and we haven't been back since. What the hell is the holdup?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's been debated for decades. There are a lot of factors involved, like cost, political will, and technological challenges.
So are we saying we just haven't had our shit together enough to get back to the moon?
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, but that's part of it. Space exploration is expensive and risky, and sometimes it's hard to justify the cost when there are so many problems here on Earth.
But come on, a moon base would be fucking epic.
I agree, and the good news is there's a renewed interest in lunar exploration, both from governments and private companies, so who knows, maybe we'll see a moon base sooner than we think.
Fingers crossed.
You know, all this talk about the moon reminds me of one of the more, shall we say, unique aspects of life on the ISS. It's not all scientific breakthroughs and breathtaking views.
Oh, yeah?
There's also the less glamorous side of dealing with human waste in space.
Oh, hell yeah. I was wondering, when we'd get to the poop talk, everyone wants to know how astronauts take a shit in zero gravity.
It's not as simple as it sounds. Early space missions relied on, well, let's just say primitive methods. Imagine basically taping a bag to your ass.
No thanks. Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It wasn't ideal, but thankfully things have evolved since then. The ISS has these high-tech toilets that use airflow to direct things appropriately.
Airflow. Like a reverse vacuum cleaner.
Sort of, and the waste is then processed and recycled either for use on board the station or eventually disposed of.
So they're drinking their own recycled pee. That's hardcore.
It's all part of living sustainably in space, and believe it or not, the technology they developed for space toilets has actually led to improvements in waste management systems here on Earth.
Well, I guess even poop can have a silver lining.
Exactly. And speaking of silver linings, let's talk about another aspect of life on the ISS that might surprise you: the food.
Wait, space food? I thought it was all freeze-dried ice cream in those weird tubes of goo.
It used to be pretty bland and basic, but these days, astronauts have a much wider variety of options, and the quality has improved dramatically.
Really? Like what? Do they get gourmet meals up there?
Not exactly gourmet, but they have a menu to choose from with things like lasagna, chicken teriyaki, and even shrimp cocktail.
Shrimp cocktail in space. Now that's what I'm talking about.
And they can request specific foods they miss from home. They even have a special oven that uses heat and pressure to cook food, so it's not just all rehydrated meals.
So they're not exactly roughing it up there, are they?
Well, it's all relative. Imagine eating all your meals out of pouches and having to clean up crumbs in zero gravity. It's still a far cry from a five-star restaurant.
Yeah, but it sounds a hell of a lot better than what I imagined. So they've got decent food, a toilet that actually works, and a view that would make even the most jaded asshole weep.
Pretty much. But let's not forget, living on the ISS is still a challenging and dangerous experience. It takes a rare breed to handle the isolation, the confinement, and the constant threat of something going wrong.
True, but it sounds like they're making the best of it. So we've covered the good, the bad, and the ugly of life on the ISS, but what about the bottom line? Was it worth the astronomical cost?
That's the question we'll be tackling in our final segment. Stay tuned, folks. We're about to get into the real nitty-gritty. All right, let's talk money. We've danced around it enough.
It's time to pay the piper.
The ISS is the most expensive single object ever built.
Really?
We're talking somewhere north of $150 billion.
Holy shit. That's more than some country's entire GDP makes my student loans look like chump change.
It is a mind-boggling amount of money.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, that's just the cost of building the damn thing. Doesn't include all the operational costs, launching supplies, maintenance, astronaut training that adds another hefty chunk of change every year.
So the ISS is basically a giant orbiting money pit.
It's an investment.
Was it really worth all that cash?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's no doubt the ISS has given us some incredible scientific discoveries and technological advancements.
Right.
But on the other hand, we could have spent that money on other things like, curing cancer or ending world hunger.
Or we could have just blown it all on a giant kick-ass laser show visible from space. That would have been pretty epic.
I'm sure it would have been a sight to behold, but at the end of the day, the decision to build and maintain the ISS was a political one. It was a big fuck you to the Soviets during the Cold War, and then it became a symbol of international cooperation, a way to show the world that we can work together to achieve great things.
Yeah, all that kumbaya bullshit. But it still feels like a shit ton of money, especially when there are so many problems down here on Earth that need solving.
I hear you. But it's important to remember that investing in science and technology often leads to unexpected benefits down the line. Who knows? Maybe some of the research done on the ISS will lead to breakthroughs that benefit all of humanity. Maybe we'll discover new cancer treatments, new ways to generate clean energy. Who knows what the future holds?
Right, all right. I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. So, bottom line, what's the final verdict on the ISS? Success or failure?
I'd say it's a qualified success. It's an incredible feat of engineering, a testament to human ingenuity, and it's given us valuable scientific data, but it's also been insanely expensive, and its long-term impact remains to be seen. Maybe it'll be remembered as a stepping stone to a brighter future. Maybe it'll just be a giant, expensive monument to Cold War paranoia. Only time will tell.
Well said. There you have it, folks. The International Space Station, a giant, expensive, and sometimes batshit crazy testament to human ambition, international cooperation, and the never-ending pursuit of knowledge. It's been a hell of a ride, but all good things must come to an end. So long, and thanks for all the space fish.
Godspeed, ISS.
And there you have it, folks. Another deep dive successfully completed. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies and your minds open to the infinite possibilities. And for fuck's sake, don't forget to recycle. Those astronauts are drinking their own pee up there. The least you can do is separate your cardboard from your plastic wee out.